Hello, Facebook. How are you? I'm super excited to be here with you today. And I am doing this on my personal page. Usually I do this on my Love Your Body Facebook page, but I don't know. What I'm going to share today is going to be deeply personal. So I figured let's share it on my personal page. If you are watching live, I would love to know who's here. So please feel free to comment, to like it, to share some love. I'd love to know who is watching. So what I'm going to be talking about today is something that's super near and dear to my heart. It's something I'm really, really passionate about. And it's pretty much the foundation for my coaching practice and what I've been building for the past 2 years. So there's 3 foundational principles that I use in my coaching practice. Hi, Angela. Hi, Mom. My mom's watching, everyone. She's my biggest cheerleader. So there's 3 foundational principles that are at the root of the work that I do with my clients. And the first one is that every woman and man, but I typically work with women, is capable of creating the health and the life that they desire. The second is that it's actually very easy to do so. And the third is that our bodies are the number one authority on what they want and need at any given time. And so I'm going to be talking about a little bit about that for like the next 20 minutes or so. And as I'm talking, I'd love to know what thoughts are coming up for you, what you're liking, what you want more clarity on. Please feel free to ask questions as well. But I want to start off with just a little bit of an introduction and a story of how I ended up here talking to you guys about intuitive health and effortless health. So again, I am a transformational wellness coach, and I like to preface by saying that I do very little work when it comes to nutrition or dieting. That is not my area of expertise. What I do specialize in is actually sustainable weight loss and helping women cultivate their own unique expression of health, whatever that might look like for them, while at the same time avoiding anything that feels like restriction or shame or guilt, because I really do feel like that does more to harm our bodies than good. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that. But what I would love to do first is just share a little bit about my story and why this concept is so important to me. And if you're watching, I see Becca joined us. Hi, Becca and Lucas. Thank you everyone for watching right now. So here's a little bit about me, how I ended up doing this. I got into health coaching after my own experience with weight loss. So in my early to mid 20s or so, I found myself in a place that I think many young women and probably some men can relate to. I was working a very stressful job at a fashion company, Aeropostale, anybody who knows that company. And it was a fun experience while also being an incredibly stressful experience. So anybody who's worked in fashion knows that it is not the glitz and glam that it is made out to be. It's a lot of long hours. It's very stressful work. It's very demanding. I was working 12 to 14-hour days. And during that time, I developed some lifestyle habits that really were not serving me. So I was going to happy hour 3 to 4 nights a week. I think I did the math once recently on how many drinks I was averaging per week. It was about like upwards of like 16 drinks per week. By the time I'd finished happy hour during the week and a couple bottles of wine on the weekend. I had also developed an emotional eating habit that I didn't realize I had until much later, where I was kind of self-medicating with food. And I had the weight gain and the acne and the ultimately depression to prove it. And also a lot of like just discomfort in my body. I had digestive issues, all those kinds of things. And so I did what many people do in a situation like that. I went on a cleanse. So I went on what was supposed to be a temporary elimination diet that turned into a much more long-term experience. And so during this elimination diet, I was cutting out everything from my diet. I cut out gluten and dairy and sugar and alcohol and nightshades and so many things that I actually really loved. And yeah, during that time, I lost a lot of weight. So I was experiencing myself losing weight consistently, and I had a lot of accolades and I guess compliments and appreciations from other people that I was losing the weight. And for someone who has always been in a little bit of a bigger body, for lack of a better word, hearing those types of compliments were really feeding my lack of self-esteem. And I started to create a lot of identity around what I was receiving as far as compliments and acknowledgement for being able to lose all of this weight and keep it off. However, like I mentioned before, I also had, hey Katie, I also had a lot of acne. I had female adult acne all over my chin. I had really bad digestive issues. And during that cleanse that I was on, none of that cleared up. So I still had the acne, I still had the digestive issues. And then I started to develop this social anxiety when I was out with my friends eating. And I, would tell myself when they'd order the French fries, like, oh God, can't believe they're eating those French fries. Like, I would never eat those French fries. My body is too clean. And I would have all this virtue wrapped up in it, right? But in the back of my mind, I was like, oh God, I just want those French fries. Somebody just give me those French fries. And, it was kind of like, I look back on that time with a lot of gratitude because it brought me to coaching. It brought me to where I am now. However, it was not sustainable. And so it kind of all hit the fan, like, I would say about a little over a year ago when I was in Alaska on a cruise with my husband. And anybody who has been on a cruise before, I see my mother-in-law is watching. She knows all about cruises. Anybody who's been on a cruise knows that what you do is you eat. You eat and enjoy, right? And so I found myself indulging in things that I normally wouldn't indulge in. So I would have wine and I would have dessert and I would have an appetizer. And I had a moment during this trip where I broke down crying and my husband was like, what is wrong with you? And I told him that I was terrified that I was going to get fat on this trip. And if I got fat, what would that mean about me as a coach? It would mean I was a failure. And what would that mean about all the love that I was receiving for being able to lose this weight and keep it off? It would mean I would lose it. And so as synergy would have it, I brought one book with me on this trip. And it's this book called Intuitive Eating. And if you've never heard of it, I highly recommend picking it up. It was completely life-changing for me. And it's all about cultivating a healthy relationship to your body and food that's free and flexible and ultimately really nourishing to your own unique expression of health. And so I read this book, and when I came back from my vacation, I made a decision that I was going to completely change my relationship to my body and food, and I was going to focus on what works for me, and that I also wanted to help other women do the same. And so that's kind of a little story about how I ended up here. And what I really wanted to talk about during this time was dieting and the diet mentality. So if anybody on this who's watching right now, if you like dieting, I'd love for you to leave a comment saying like, I love dieting. I have a feeling no one is going to say it. Because dieting sucks. There's even a big conversation that's happening in the body positive anti-diet community. I wouldn't go as far as to say this, but some people consider dieting to be abuse to your body because it causes the body to go into a place of starvation. And I know that's a little bit extreme, but dieting itself is not sustainable. Dieting to lose weight, dieting to get your body to a certain size is not sustainable. And there's a few reasons for that. The first one, there's a physiological reason, and then there's some emotional reasons as well. So from a physiological perspective, dieting actually causes your body to retain more fat. It actually completely destroys your metabolism. So my mom agrees with me. Thanks, Mom. So chronic dieting actually teaches the body to retain more fat when you start eating again. And that's actually a survival mechanism that our bodies created over time when we were experiencing feast and famine. So during the times of famine, our body would retain more fat in order for us to survive. So that's what's happening when you're yo-yo dieting, and it's actually completely destroying your metabolism. Also, dieting and chronic food restriction has been linked to feelings of intense cravings as well as an intense desire to binge. There's actually been studies done on both rats and humans that show that there's a desire to binge after a period of chronic food restriction, and specifically binge on high fat and high sugar foods. And then from an emotional perspective, despite body weight itself, dieting has been correlated back to depression, anxiety, and ultimately a lowered self-esteem and feelings of failure. So overall, really doesn't feel good for us, right? And if dieting sucks so much, right, if it does all of these things in our body, no one really enjoys doing it. I didn't see anybody comment and say that they actually enjoy dieting. Then why do we do it? Why do we diet? So there's a few reasons for that are kind of built into our society and our tribe, and we learn them from a very young age. And so I like to give this explanation about where dieting comes from, where the diet mentality comes from. And the first place that I want to unpack is it goes back to our childhood, right? And I want to preface by saying that my mom is watching this. She's amazing. Parents always have the best of intentions for their children, right? And if you think about any child in your life, how empowered they are in their bodies, right? Like my niece and nephew are just kind of like running around all the time, and they don't care of who sees their buns or who sees their bellies. They're super empowered in their bodies. And children are also super empowered when it comes to eating. So we're actually born with internal mechanisms that tell us when to start eating and when to stop eating. However, over time, those wires kind of tend to get a little bit crossed, and that happens for a couple of reasons. So the first one being there's this clean your plate mentality. So many of us when we were kids were told that we're a good girl or we're a good boy if we clear our entire plate. So even if we're full, we're like, oh, well, I'm going to be a good girl, so I'm going to eat my entire plate. And then oftentimes be rewarded with dessert after. So even though you're full, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to eat this also so that I can eat even more food after. There's the idea of being rewarded or punished with food in general. So you're a good girl or a good boy, you get ice cream, or you're not, and you don't get ice cream. And so you can see how that pattern might actually show up in your adult life as well. I know that I sometimes still struggle with this, and did a lot more when I was experiencing the diet mentality, where it was like, well, I was so good today, I deserve to have, an ice cream sundae, or I was really bad yesterday, and now I can't have ice cream for a week, or I need to run an extra 2 miles on the treadmill, whatever it is. And so also, and this is probably something that happens more to young women, but I'm sure young men experience this as well. There's a cultural, almost like a tribe mentality that comes with critiquing our bodies. So we aren't actually born to want to diet and hate our bodies. That's something that's learned over time, and it's reinforced by society, right? It's reinforced by an industry, a $55 billion industry, which is the diet industry, that thrives on us outsourcing our intuitive health to them. So we're born with this intuitive sense of health, right? We're born with this intuitive sense of when to start eating and when to stop eating. The wires tend to get crossed a little bit when we're younger and we're learning how to eat. And then when we're older, we start to look to other sources to tell us what works for us, right? So, and that's where the diet industry comes in. And so many of these programs, these diet programs, are actually set up for your failure. So they're set up so that you go on them, you see a result, and then you end up going off of it, putting all the weight back on, destroying your metabolism, and then you have to go back on it. And so they're kind of keeping that one existing customer, right? Or there's the idea of the maintenance plan. You go on this diet, you can't ever go off of it, you have to be on the maintenance plan, right? Because it's cheaper to keep an existing customer than it is to create a new one. And so that's kind of where dieting comes from. And these companies and these systems are ultimately not sustainable and don't have your own unique expression of health. And so there's a statistic that really frightened me when I learned it. It's what percentage of people do you think lose weight and then put it back on within 6 months to a year? And so that percentage is actually 98%. It's virtually everyone loses the weight and puts it back on. And I believe that's because the systems that we're using are not sustainable, and because the diet mentality forces us to come from a place of restriction and deprivation and shame and guilt, which is also not a sustainable or healthy way to get anything in life. And so I've been talking a little bit about the diet mentality, and I want to share with you what it is, a definition of the diet mentality, what that ultimately means. So the diet mentality is any behavior or thought process around food that comes from a place of shame or guilt or judgment or punishment. And I know that's pretty broad, but I wanted to give some specific examples here so that you guys can have an idea of what the diet mentality is. So some specific actions would be counting calories or grams of fat, eating only safe foods or good foods. So maybe somebody can relate to the feeling of like, oh, I've been really good today. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that already. Eating only at certain times of the day. So this was a big one for me. So I would stop myself from eating after like 6:30, 7, and I would eat a really small dinner and be starving when I went to sleep. I'd be like, okay, I'm okay. Like I'll just sleep through it. But ultimately I would wake up miserable and like nauseous from being so hungry. Paying a penance for eating bad foods, like we talked about before. Second guessing or judging if you deserve to eat something, quote unquote, deserve to eat something, or taking on a certain diet, something like a gluten-free or a vegan or a vegetarian, simply for weight loss as opposed to some sort of health reason, like if you're celiac or have an actual gluten sensitivity, or for a socially conscious reason, such as veganism or vegetarianism. And so that's the diet mentality. That's what is responsible for us not being able to sustainably lose weight, because it's coming from a place of shame and judgment and guilt. And this is what I feel like I'm here to do on planet Earth, is to stomp out the diet mentality and really help people come from a place of just complete freedom and flexibility, and ultimately like joy when it comes to their health. Like how amazing would that feel to just be like, oh yeah, like I feel so joyful in this body. I feel so good in this body. And I trust myself. I trust my own ability to, course correct and attune to my own needs. It's such a freeing experience to be in that place. And it's so much more sustainable. And I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. Anybody who's watching, if you agree, if you don't agree, like what you'd love to know more about when it comes to this. And ultimately, I wanted to give everyone during this time my five tips to begin to cultivate your own intuitive sense of health. And I have it on a nice little handout. If anybody's interested in it, you can reach out to me and I'll send it to you. But yes, it's my 5 steps to begin to cultivate a healthy relationship to food. And the first one is to honor your hunger. So that might seem really obvious, but the diet mentality often causes us to not eat when we're hungry, right? Because we're only supposed to be, within a certain amount of points or a certain amount of calories, and we end up being starving because of it. So, but again, studies have shown that food restriction and dieting are actually counterproductive because they turn on neurochemical switches in the brain that drive us to eat. It also destroys our metabolism. It affects our mood, our physical energy, our sex drive. So it's really, really ultimately not doing your body any service to put it into a place of starvation. So what I recommend to my clients is that they begin to listen to their body's internal cues for hunger and provide themselves with adequate nourishment. And adequate nourishment does mean eating carbs. So carbs are your body's main source of energy. Carbs are converted to glucose in the body, which is your body's main source of energy. So whether it's a sweet potato or a piece of Ezekiel bread, your body does need carbs. And I know that to say honor your hunger seems like obvious, right? But you'd be surprised how many people, I've actually worked with several clients where they've told me actually, I don't know what it feels like to be hungry. And I'm like, okay, well, let's figure it out. So one of my clients didn't know what it felt like to be hungry. And we started to work together to create some awareness around it. And she noticed that she actually felt hunger in her head first before she felt it in her stomach. By the time she felt it in her stomach, she was so ravenous that she would eat everything in sight and end up with a big stomach ache and miserable afterwards. So it's actually a really important step to notice when you're letting yourself, noticing that you're actually just needing nourishment, and when you've allowed yourself to get to the point of ravenous where you're no longer making good decisions. And the second one that piggybacks on top of that is to respect your fullness. So the diet mentality often fosters this need to clear your plate, right? So because you're only eating at a specific time, you're like, oh, I have to take in as much food as possible because I'm not going to be allowed to eat again for a while. So what I work with my clients on is learning to recognize their own internal cues for satiety and to respect that. And this can be one that's a little bit challenging for people to figure out at first, but it makes such a big difference when you're able to really tune in and listen to it. And so there's a question that I love to give my clients to use anytime they're in an eating experience. And that's to halfway through the meal, stop, put your fork down, and ask yourself, am I about to take this next bite because I need more energy? Or is it simply for pleasure? And it doesn't matter what the answer to that question is or what you decide to do next, because this is about creating awareness. And you're approaching this with complete curiosity. So even if you're full, you're like, actually, I'm really freaking full, but I'm going to take this next bite anyways. Go ahead and do it and own it. And next time, know that you have the choice to make a better decision, whatever that means for you. The third one is to understand your cravings. This one's really, really important. So oftentimes when we aren't experiencing sweetness and pleasure in our lives, it's because we're really overwhelmed and stressed. And overwhelm and stress can lead us to seek for pleasure in any way that we can get it. And oftentimes that's in food. So I'm sure many people can relate to the experience of, okay, I had a really rough day today, so I deserve to have a glass of wine or maybe even a bottle of wine, right? And so oftentimes that need to bring pleasure into our lives, to bring us down from that experience of overwhelm, can be filled with something non-edible. So something as simple as going for a walk or calling your mom. I like to do that. or reading a book. Maybe it's watching a show on Netflix. Maybe it's a bath, whatever it is, making a list of that which brings you pleasure outside of chocolate and trigger foods and comfort foods, and choosing from that list anytime you are experiencing a craving. And also knowing that if you do give into that craving, you choose to, make it a conscious choice. Know that it's your right. It's your right to make that choice. So whether it's like, I ate a bar of chocolate last night, own it and enjoy every single bite of it. Be present with that experience, because how much would it suck to actually do that, to eat that food and then just feel like guilt and shame afterwards? At least feel good about it. Which brings me to my next tip, which is to be present with the eating experience. So we live in a culture now where we're constantly plugged in, right? We're constantly on social media or watching TV or talking to somebody. There's many, many distractions, right? And so when we are distracted during the eating experience, this oftentimes causes us to eat more than we actually need. And there's a zone out factor that sort of happens too. You're almost like, I need to eat all of this food as quickly as I can because, I'm not going to be able to eat again for a while. And that's a subconscious choice. It might not be a conscious choice, but I have worked with clients before. They're like, I don't even know what happened. I just kind of blacked out and ate all that food. And so slowing down and being present with the eating experience and using all 5 of your senses, right? We're sensory human beings. We experience life through all of our senses. So you can enjoy your food with all of your senses, and you notice how much more pleasure there is in that experience. So there's another really important piece of the slow down factor, and that's to chew your food. So the average person chews a bite of food 3 times, which is essentially just sticking the food in your stomach. And it's really difficult for your body to break that down. And you're also missing out on the pleasurable experience that comes with chewing your food and tasting it. It's crazy. So the recommended chews per bite is 20 to 30 times per bite. And I know that seems like a lot. Every time I tell someone that, they're like, oh my God, I'm going to be eating forever. And I'm like, yeah, at first it's going to feel really unnatural, but I've actually had clients tell me that this was the biggest needle mover for them when it came to healing their digestive issues as well as losing weight, because they were able to slow down and be present with the experience and notice that they actually ended up being satisfied with even less food. So slowing down 20 to 30 times per bite, and actually the recommended length of a meal is about 20 minutes. So scheduling in 20 minutes for each meal can be really, really helpful and allow you to slow down and create that space for you to eat your food and be present with it and use all of your senses. And then the last one here is to move for energy and vitality. So this is your health coach here, Health Coach Holly, telling you that if you want to, you can forget all of the boot camps and shred classes and things that leave you sore and miserable. I know that I really do not like those types of workouts. And many people I talk to also don't like them, and they oftentimes leave us feeling sore. So we're only able to go to move our bodies once every other week. So finding movement that feels good for your body, that you're able to do consistently every day or every other day, is so much more effective than just one shred calorie burning session a week. And so I would invite you to ask yourselves, what feels good for me? For me, I love walking. I actually call it run walking, because I'll run a little bit and then walk, and then run a little bit and then walk. And maybe do a little bit of high intensity interval training just to get my heart rate up and just to build some muscle. And that feels really good. And I seriously only intentionally exercise, move my body 20 to 30 minutes a day. And that feels good. And it's sustainable. And it allows me to maintain my weight. And so I would recommend for you to figure out what works for your body and what feels good for you. And so those are my 5 steps to intuitive health. And these are the steps that I introduce into my life after that experience that I shared with you in the beginning of our time together when I was in Alaska and I came back and I just kind of threw out the rule book. This is what really moved the needle when it came to my health and my relationship to my body and food. And it wasn't until then that my acne actually cleared up, that my digestive issues went away, and that I felt this sense of empowerment in this body and in my life that I had never felt before. And so if there's anything that you take away from our time together today, it's that is possible for you too. And that creating your own unique expression of health can be and should be really, really super easy. So that's what I had to share with you today. That was what was on my mind. I also have those steps. If you didn't have a chance to write them down, I have them written out on a beautiful piece of paper here that I can send to you in a PDF. So if you would like that, feel free to comment below and I can send it to you. But if you have any questions about what I shared today, again, feel free to post those in the comments. I am obsessed with this work. It's why I wake up in the morning. I'm so excited about it. And I work with people one-on-one and in groups, and just it's amazing to watch the transformation that happens through this process and through this work. So I hope it was of service to you. I hope it inspired you. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday, everyone. Mwah. Bye.